Greetings, brothers and sisters. Bunch of stuff to get to today. Some funny stuff. Hunter Biden did that impromptu press conference. It's great. Chris Cuomos back in the news a lot lately. A bunch of people sent me that. He's laughing at a person with Tourette syndrome, which is classic Cuomos. That whole thing's great. And then Jill Biden here, this is critics roast Jill Biden's bizarre Hunger Games aesthetic, White House Christmas, whatever it is. It's the Nutcracker. I want to talk a little bit about the color purple also. A couple of other things, and then I want to address, somebody said I hate Jesus in a comment, and then there was another meme that's going around. I wanted to talk about that to do with Jesus. Christmas is coming up and whatever. But I would say the opposite is true. But, I clearly don't hate Jesus, right? So I want to get into that. Who are the real Jesus haters? And let's start off here. Okay, the music is horrible, and there's tap dancing. But this is the Nutcracker. And they've given it sort of an urban theme, and I don't know what that is right there. And this woman here is wearing I don't know, is that a pig head or whatever it is? It's kind of Eyes Wide Shutty, Hunger Games type of thing. This is the main, the girl who's, there's a girl in Nutcracker, and she's constantly opening her ghoul hole, this girl. There's a dude with a flower on his head over here. And is there nothing, tap dancing is annoying. There's one of the Nutcrackers. There's a variety of Nutcrackers, right? That guy's a Nutcracker. The Nutcracker is, like Elf in the Shelf and some of these other things that have really nothing to do with Jesus and not even all that much to do with Christmas. And it's depressing. It's kind of weird. The whole Nutcracker theme, there's sort of it's like a young girl sees a Nutcracker. It's sort of like Alice in Wonderland. It's a little bit kind of pedo energy. And so it's very creepy. And they've made it even worse here. Like the Nutcracker should just disappear. It's depressing. The opera, the ballet, whatever they use it. It's just, it's weird. And then, they've just wasting taxpayer money here doing this thing. And, they got professional dancers turn it into this thing here. But there's various Nutcrackers. There's like two major Nutcrackers. I don't know. And one of the Nutcrackers is a female. This is the one here, which is not traditional. Like they're trying to, jazz the whole thing up. And it just fails. It's just another Biden fail. There's a little pyramid over there. There's a Nutcracker doing a little tap dancing. I mean, is anything less appealing to kids than something like this? Like, who is this for? What's the target audience? This kind of weird sort of semi-flirtatious dance between the Nutcracker and the girl. And then there's this guy. This girl does the air guitar, but there's no guitar in the song. I checked it out. And then they're dancing here. We're going to go, whoa, look, ding, boom, boom. Do shake your hips. Oh, it's my turn. And so just another epic Joe Biden fail. So that reminded me that the color purple, they've now made it into a musical. Let's watch a little bit of it here. So I uploaded this video and this trailer, whatever it is, WB, whoever owns the trailer here, copyrighted the video. And so I'm taking out the trailer, which is just stupid. Like, it's stupid for them to do that. I mean, someone might watch this and want to, even if I'm saying negative things about it, someone might watch the trailer and at least it's getting the word out this movie's out, right? Which is what trailers are for. All these Netflix, all these dopey companies that copyright trailers, it's just really stupid. But anyways, I'm cutting out most of it. I'm going to leave the, my description of the thing in here. And so, it might not make sense to some extent because I've cut out some of the clips, but I'll leave enough in there so you get the idea of it. This Christmas Day.
Just like Mom taught us.
A bold, fresh new take. They've added singing and dancing, right? Which made it into a musical Bollywood type of, whatever it is. So I watched The Color Purple when I was younger, like some of it, and really didn't understand it and didn't like it. Then watched it years later when I was working with abuse, right, with I was working in counseling as a clinician, counselor, whatever it was. And, I knew a lot more about abuse and sexual abuse. And it is a very depressing movie where the Whoopi Goldberg character, the main character, is abused from a very young age and then abused by her husband. And eventually she's kind of liberated by her husband's girlfriend. They have a sexual relationship, whatever. But it's depressing, and it's about somebody who's basically stepped on and mistreated her whole life, right? And I don't know how you turn that into a musical. Like adding singing and dancing to something does not make it better. I remember I worked at this place in Los Alamos. It was like kind of a place kids could go to after school, like, all different age groups, teenagers and, younger kids. And it was supposed to be like sort of a counseling center, but it was, relaxed. And there was activities for the kids to do. And there was a TV, and one day they were watching a Disney movie. And these burnouts, there's this one burnout kid who was just hilarious. And he came in and he was commenting on the Disney movie. He's like, "Oh, they're not going to sing. No." Like he was just, I really can't do it justice here, but it's really funny. Because these Disney movies and Bollywood movies and plays and, all this stuff and what they did with the Nutcracker, I mean, that was outdated when I grew up, right? That was the no malarkey days where there were movies, Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers where they're singing and that stuff. But it's something of a past, a bygone era. And when you add music to something that's depressing and you package it as a Christmas movie.
Hell no. There's gonna be some changes made.
We need to look like we belong.
It's also kind of an anti-man movie as well. The men don't come off very well here. Black men particularly.
Time to see the world. Hell no.
Apparently there's a song called Hell No in a Christmas movie.
Oh, Miss Celie, you look good. Hell no.
Hell no. All right, so there's that.
The same stable genius who said the biggest problem we had in the Revolutionary War is we didn't have enough airports.
What?
Whoa.
So if you watch the whole speech, he's mocking. I mean, this is he knows what he's doing here. He still butchers it and it's goofy, but he doesn't believe what he just said. Like it's not one of his actual gaffes. It is a gaffe in a different way. Like it's weird, but it's taken out of context, right? They don't show you the whole clip, which often happens with the Republicans. And it happens with the Democrats too, but the Republicans do it with Jojo Bagoo, and you don't have to do it because you don't have to manipulate Jojo Bagoo because he's senile. Like there's plenty of evidence that he's senile. You don't have to play around with it. And this is from 2019, and whatever it is, right? Years and years ago when he was campaigning. But the problem is, like he's so senile that anything he says and any gaffe that he creates is believable. There's nothing that he's not capable of saying, that he would put out there that you would believe, oh, that's not real. I mean, they do manipulate this one, but the guy's senile, right? Speaking of being a dope, Ana Navarro is probably the stupidest person on television.
The problem that Ron DeSantis has is that you get one chance to create a first impression, and he's made that first impression now. And his campaign has that certain stench of political death that is very hard to get rid of.
What about Febreze? It's just so hard to get rid of the stench of political death.
The problem he has, I think, on this abortion issue, and I wish somebody had pushed back on him on that, is we had a very similar case to what's happening in Texas, in Florida, in March. A woman named Deborah Dorbert,
Dorbert, remember that name. She's going places.
Carrying a child that had no kidneys and was sure to die. And because of the law...
Well, why did it have no kidneys? What happened there? Is there something that Deborah Dorbert took or was given that could have contributed to a baby being born without kidneys? Which is that, there's more to that story, right?
In Florida, because of the lack of exceptions, because doctors are terrified of being criminalized, of being sued, because of all of that, this woman had to carry that baby to term in Florida.
That baby to term. She had to carry that baby to term. So I've talked about this in the past. When liberal women, when feminist women, women who are pro-choice, talk about pregnancy, if they want it, it's a baby. If they think it should be aborted, it's something else, right? And that isn't, it's always a baby, right? I talked about this with Amy Schumer, who had trouble getting pregnant. And when you attribute the life that's in your belly, in your uterus, when you attribute a life to it, it's a baby. And it's always a baby. Whether it's a fetus, whether it's an embryo, whether it's a zygote or whatever the stages are, right? It's a human life. And there's no debating that. Life begins at conception. That's scientifically and spiritually proven. That when you have when you conceived a baby, it's a baby. And that's where your life starts. Your life as a person started at conception. You're not aware of it. You don't have memories of it. You don't have a consciousness of it. But that's when life begins. So it's a human life. And if it's a human life, then destroying it is murder. I have a different kind of a take on abortion. Like if you got an abortion, if you're a woman who's listening to this, got an abortion, like I don't judge you. And, there's all kinds of circumstances. Like the right wing is too, judgy about the thing, and it is what it is, right? So it's a systemic problem, and it falls on the woman, right? The woman suffers. The woman suffers the consequences of being funneled into a situation where they're forced to do something like this, right? And feel forced to do it. And, it's a lot of them, all of them suffer in one way or another. So it's not for me, it's not a judgy thing. It isn't about any of these things. It's not political. It doesn't matter what the government says or not says. In this circumstance, it's murder or it's not. And it is, and there are consequences for it. Whatever those consequences are, they're there, right? They're, the women suffer it, whatever, the man, whatever spiritual consequences, just like anything else. Everything is accounted for. And so it's not up to me. Like, I don't, And the political stuff, the Roe v. Wade stuff going on politically, means nothing to me because it's a decision or it's something of a higher nature. It's about the essence of, the definition of human life. My thing is call it what it is because I don't, our society would have crumbled economically, and if all the unwanted children had been born, and we're talking about maybe 100 million abortions have taken place. So if there was another 100 million of kids who are growing up in a crappy environment, like maybe one of them's a saint, sure, one of them, someone's great, but most of them wouldn't be. It's a symptom of a much bigger problem that we've got a degraded system, right? And so I don't, it's nothing you can't solve this issue. It's just another part of the beastly system you can't solve. Because if you outlaw abortion, there's still going to happen, one. And two, there's going to be consequences for these kids who are born, who are, in this situation, right? But she attributed life to it. She attributed, personhood. She said it was a person, right? Like this is a baby inside. And whether you allow that baby to be born and die, she's going to talk about that in a second. I'll show you that part. Or you terminate it in the womb, kill it in the womb, murder it in the womb. Who's to say what's the right thing to do there? There's no good situation when a baby doesn't have kidneys, right? It's not going to live, but does that mean you get to destroy it in the womb? Like it has a life cycle, right? What if everybody, you could view that with everybody. Oh, you're just going to die anyway. You're going to live a horrible life and you're going to die. So we get to, make the decision for you, right? That's what's happening with abortion. Like most of the aborted babies would have bad lives because most people have bad lives as it is. If you think about how many miserable people there are, 60% of kids are depressed. Most of these kids being born into this, apocalyptic future are going to have miserable lives. But that's what their souls chose. That's what their essence chose. That's what their purpose is. They chose to be born at this time, right? You can't make a decision on something just because it's going to suffer. And whether it's going to die in a short period of time, like minutes after it's born, or 80 years, it's still going to die. The end is inevitable. So, it's not, that's not an excuse or a reason to say that all abortions should be legal, right? Let's watch the end here. So let's go back to this part here. She says this here.
Named Deborah Dorbert, who was carrying a child that had no kidneys and was sure to die.
We're all sure to die, right? It's inevitable. We're all sure to die, right? All of us are going to die. That's that's what's going to happen. That's what's up, right? That's there's no, whether it's minutes or 80 years, right? You can't say that those minutes aren't important. Okay, let's say you had 90 minutes left to live, and you were in pain, and you were going to die in 90 minutes. Would it be okay for someone to come along and just end you because, oh, you only got 90 minutes left, so, I mean, geez, we got to move on, right? We got things to do. 90 minutes is a lot, right? If you had 90 minutes left to live, you would probably want to say goodbye to people or do things or whatever. What would you do in those 90 minutes, right? Even if you were in pain. And so, people are fighting sometimes into their last breath, even if they have a minute left to live, right? And so who's to say what that baby's 90 minutes is and its importance on a spiritual level or whatever else, right?
In Florida, and because she didn't have the money to go out of state and hold that baby for 90 minutes while it gasped for air in her arms. To me, that is something that Ron DeSantis needs to explain. Ken Paxton.
Okay, so why would not kill it then, right? It had 90 minutes. It had a 90-minute life. It had an hour and a half life. And yeah, you're saying, well, that's not 80 years. That's not 100 years. That's not 50 years, whatever it is. But people die. Kids die, right? When I was in grade school, Anne-Marie Lopez, I was, I think, in first grade, third grade maybe when they said it. But she was in my class for 3 years. And I don't think how many times I talked to her. I'm a little kid, right? You have, minimal memory, but I remember her being in my class. And then one day the teacher came in and said she died of leukemia. And I was kind of stunned by that. Like, as a memory I've kept with, it stayed with me. I think I was in third grade when she died. But it happens. I was like, kids can die. I was, thinking about it. We all die, right? Death is inevitable. And you don't know what that soul got out of that 90 minutes of life, right? And she's saying, watch it sit there and gasp for air like it's some kind of cruel thing. Yeah, it's sad and hard to watch. That's horrible to watch. It's traumatic for the mom, the family. It's horrible. It's a horrible thing. Horrible story. Why was it born without kidneys? And, maybe there's a more nefarious explanation about something, to do with the bloop or something or whatever, right? We don't even know. But in terms of the experience, it's horrible. But does that mean you get to terminate it, kill it in the womb, right? Because you wouldn't kill it when it's out, like it's sitting there gasping for air. It's going to die. But it has a life course, right? Everything has its, its journey. Even when babies are miscarried, the soul can benefit from that experience. Like a soul can benefit from those 3 months in utero. We don't even know what happens in that in terms of samskaric burning off and things like that. We don't know what happens. And, it can serve a purpose. A miscarriage can serve a purpose in your life. It can, wake you up. It can change your trajectory or something. Miscarriages are, powerful things, right? And so, we don't even know, right? We don't even know what's happening there. And that's my point about all this stuff.
And Governor Abbott need to explain, because women in this country deserve an answer as to the cruelty and the idea that these men in the capitals of these states are telling women what is health care and what is not.
Well, why is it cruelty? Is it cruelty not to kill or murder a baby in the womb, right? Is it somehow, better to do it that way? Like, in what way, right? I mean, it had 90 minutes of something that was, sounds like a pretty miserable existence, but that's what its soul chose. If I would assume she's a Christian. I don't know, Mike, what she is. She's, obviously pretty stupid, but, you hear her talk, she's just a dope. Very emotional as well. But in terms of this, right, we don't know. We don't know what, what benefit or gain or why a child or soul would choose that existence. Or maybe it didn't choose that existence, but because of environmental issues and whatever was going on with the mom that caused her to have a baby without kidneys, right?
Business career, I I'm proud of my time serving on a dozen different boards of directors. And I'm proud of my efforts towards global business relationships. For 6 years, MAGA Republicans, including members of the House committees who are in a closed-door session right now, have impugned my character, invaded my privacy.
Impugned your character. You released your laptop that said everything you need to know about your character. The funny thing about this, the audio's not great, and I couldn't find a better audio. Maybe there is one out there, but either way, is that he's outraged. Like, he acts like a victim and outraged, and like somehow he's getting an unfair deal. This really entitled, worthless human being, right? Because not only is he a crackhead, but he also is a lawyer. You know, his dad talks about how smart he is, and, you know, maybe he's, you know, clever or smart in some kind of a way, right? But he comes out here very lawyerly. But the guy's a crackhead, maybe the most successful crackhead ever. And he's been a disaster. And it's 100% about him, right? And he's whining about being mistreated. And the outrage, you know, with this, the holier-than-thou attitude, right? Of course you're going to be treated this way because of the kind of person you are and the kind of person your dad is and everything that's happened in terms of this contentious us against them, you know, right versus left type of division that's taken place in our country.
Attacked my wife, my children, my family, and my friends.
You left out the stripper named Dallas from Arkansas. People always want me to point out that her real name's London, but really that's not. To me, that doesn't make the joke better. But other people think it does. But the stripper from Arkansas named Dallas that you banged in New York, and you were on drugs so much you didn't know that she even existed, and, you know, all the scandal that went with it, and Joe Biden not recognizing this crackhead stripper baby. And you didn't seem to bring that up, right? Because it's embarrassing in its own right. Like, you're a disaster as a person. Like, you are someone with all this privilege and access, and you could have just, you know, taken one of these cushy jobs and not been a crackhead and been a good father, but you're a disaster as a person, and you're an addict, and, you know, not a good person on top of that, right? You know, so you can't impugn your character.
They ridiculed my struggle with addiction. They belittled my recovery. And they have tried to dehumanize me, all to embarrass and damage my father, who has devoted his entire public life to service.
No, he hasn't. You know, they always say this. He is a career-long politician, lifelong politician, who's been a scumbag, who's been a liar. He's taken big money, you know, from corporate donors and all this, and he's lived a good life on the government dime, and he's not a service-oriented. He's a scumbag, right? And he doesn't need any help embarrassing himself. The guy's senile, and he's embarrassed himself even when he wasn't senile. He's, you know, I mean, he plagiarized other people's work and got embarrassed and had to withdraw from his candidacy. He was a gaffe magnet and a joke when he was vice president his whole career, and now he's senile. So, you know, you're an embarrassment to him. He's an embarrassment to himself. And you guys are all embarrassment to the country and humanity.
For 6 years, I have been the target of the unrelenting Trump attack machine, shouting, "Where's Hunter?" Well, here's my answer. I am here. Let me state as clearly as I can. My father was not financially involved in my business, not as a practicing lawyer, not as a board member of Burisma, not in my partnership with a Chinese private businessman, not in my investments at home nor abroad, and certainly not as an artist.
Do you mean artist or do you mean a money launderer? You know, it'd be great if he took out a crack pipe and took a... if he smoked a little crack. The thing is that there's no reason for him to have any of those jobs because he was smoking crack and wasn't going to work. He didn't do anything for those places other than smoke crack. Like, he wrote a book about his crack addiction and, you know, where he was in these these sort of crack hotels and these flea bag hotels and things like this in West Hollywood, dirtbag places. And the people that were coming in and out of this, drug dealers and prostitutes and all this, right, which we know. And he talked about this. He went on Jimmy Kimmel's, talked about his book, and it documents his crack addiction to where he was, not able to function. You can't function when you're addicted to crack and any of these addictive drugs, right? And he was partying, and, you can't, just think about as you get older, when you have hangovers and things, the older you get, the worse they are. But he was addicted to hardcore drugs where he was using the drugs every day. And that's all he was doing, right? He didn't have time to go to board meetings and, do a job and perform services. So what was his service? The only explanation is his service was his dad. And if he didn't deliver his dad to them, then they had no use for him. They weren't paying for his crack addiction. They were paying for access to his father. And so that's just, an out-and-out lie. The other part about it is, he wasn't, an artist, but the other part about this is that, these Republican congressman says that the Biden family has like $20 million worth of assets that they have no accounting for. Like, they don't know how else they got them, right? They have houses that they couldn't afford. Saw this stuff with Dianne Feinstein, who died with a, $90 million private jet, and she had $120 million worth of assets, and she was making $300,000 a year. So where did the money come from? Not your salary, right? Biden didn't get these things with his salary. And so there's one explanation that his family, because it wasn't just his Hunter, but it was his brother as well, were getting paid off for access for Biden to do certain things. And Biden must have done them because this went on for about, 20 years, right? Or longer.
During my battle with addiction, my parents were there for me. They literally saved my life. They helped me in ways that I will never be able to repay. And of course, they would never expect me to. And in the depths of my addiction, I was extremely irresponsible with my finances. But to suggest that is grounds for an impeachment inquiry is beyond the absurd. It's shameless. There is no evidence to support the allegations that my father was financially involved in my business because it did not happen.
Of course it did. But what he's saying here is he didn't pay taxes and God knows what else. Because he was spending all his money on crack, and apparently he's broke now, and now he needs all this money for legal fees, and they're going after him, and, he has to pay millions of dollars in lawyers' fees, and he can't sell more of his fancy art anymore. Biden's on his way out, so is he going to get any of these jobs now that Biden is retired? Because once Biden's out, he's out. He's too old to really have much of anything. So having access to Biden right now doesn't mean anything. Biden's going to be out in a couple of years. And so, the meal ticket is dried up for this clown. And everybody knows it, right? Even that dope on The View was talking about how, everybody sold access. So she had, and these are the most, insanely supportive people of Joe Biden, the ladies on The View and the shills over at MSNBC. Like, we all know. Come on, just, this is a time where you just be honest, right? You're a crackhead. And that's, that's what your life is going to be defined by.
James Comer, Jim Jordan, Jason Smith, and their colleagues have distorted the facts by cherry-picking lines from a bank statement, manipulating text I sent, editing the testimony of my friends and former business partners, and misstating personal information that was stolen from me. There is no fairness or decency in what these Republicans are doing. They have lied over and over about every aspect of my personal and professional life. So much so that their lies have become the false facts believed by too many people. No matter how many times it is debunked, they continue to insist that my father's support of Ukraine against Russia is the result of a non-existent bribe. They displayed naked photos of me during an oversight hearing.
Why is that, Hunter? Why? How they get those photos, Hunter? Oh, because you were so cracked out, you dropped a laptop, multiple laptops in tubs. You kept on taking baths on crack and with hookers and dropping laptops. You photographed everything. You documented your whole drug use by taking videos and photos of yourself with crack pipes coming out of your mouth, you know, with hookers and engaging in illegal drug activity, embarrassing things. And then you left the hard drive at a place where the guy freaked out and brought it to the FBI, who hid it away so that your father could get elected, even though it was a major scandal. And they were already investigating you for attempted, your brother's widow, who you were banging, was worried you were going to commit suicide, so she took your handgun, which you had illegally because you were smoking crack and you were having felony charges for that, and she threw it away in a trash can next to a high school, and a homeless guy got it. And the Secret Service had to get involved. Like, it's all because of you being a complete chucklehead and a bonehead, and now you're being a lawyer and, fainting. Oh, I'm so outraged by the way I'm being treated. You're being treated exactly the way you deserve to be treated. Anybody else in your situation would be treated the exact same way. If this was Donald Trump's kid, it would be even worse for him. If Donald Trump had a kid like you, and Donald Trump's kids are no prize, they suck in their own way, they would be getting savaged much worse than you are by the liberal media.
And they have taken the light of my dad's love, for me, and presented it as darkness. They have no shame.
I've only seen a fraction of the pictures that are out there of Hunter Biden's laptop, where he's engaging in debauchery and all of it. But you're the one who has no shame, right? They don't have any shame either, but come on, don't bring up shame. Why are you even bringing up shame? Next to the definition of shame in the dictionary should be your picture, right? You're like, you're like Caligula. You're like one of the, you're like the epitome of human debauchery.
These same committee chairmen have engaged in unprecedented political interference in what would have already been a 5-year investigation of me. Yet, here I am, Mr. Chairman, taking up your offer when you said we can bring these people in for depositions or committee hearings, whichever they choose. Well, I am here to testify at a public hearing today to answer any of the committee's legitimate questions. Republicans do not want an open process where Americans can see their tactics, expose their baseless inquiry, or hear what I have to say. What are they afraid of? I'm here. I'm ready. Hunter, are you ready to go on?
Why not testify now, sir? Why not? Mr. Biden, if you really are not involved in your... Are we going to this deposition? Mr. Biden, if your dad was not involved, why did you call him at your business dinner? Mr. Biden.
So he says he's here after reading a very lawyerly statement, which is full of deception and BS and, spin and all of it. He runs to his car. I'm here. I'll testify right now. I'll do a deposition. And then he doesn't answer any questions. That's all you need to know about Hunter J. Biden. Okay, so let's move on to Cuomos. And so the first part here I didn't see. Someone sent me this. I had already seen the video I'm going to show you, which is the main bulk of the video, the interaction between Chris Cuomos and this woman who has, TikTok influencer has Tourette syndrome.
When I was first introduced to Balin, I thought she was just a great comedic actor and, doing blue material, whatever you want to call it. And now I'm totally devoted to what she's doing because it's so brave. And
okay, so he ends up laughing at her because when he first saw her, he thought she was faking it, and that was comedy. So he thinks it's funny, and it kind of is funny in a way. Like I understand that people suffer from Tourette's; it's not funny, and their loved ones. I understand the stigma around it, but some of it is funny. It's hard not to find it funny, right? Regardless of the context, regardless of the person suffering from a condition, because I'll get into that in a moment. Let's just show you this part. So as she's doing her stuff, when she has her sort of episodes, he's going to be fighting back laughter the whole time because he's an a-hole, right? It's now out that both Don Lemons and Chris Cuomos were never into mainstream media. Don Lemons was one of those guys who was always talking about alternative media being lesser than and mocking it. The CNN had this whole campaign against truthers and trying to demonize truthers, and these guys were a part of that. Don Lemons a little bit more, but Don Lemons has come out and said, yeah, he doesn't watch mainstream media anymore, right? Since he got fired from CNN, and this guy is saying he was never the kind of liberal Democrat he was portrayed to be, and they're both bringing in alternative stuff, which means that they sold themselves for a crappy job on CNN, well-paying shill job on CNN.
Much for coming on. And what do you hope you can do by taking the risks that you take so people can understand what you're dealing with?
I'm sorry, do you mind
She's trying not to laugh. It's like, this is the whole thing.
repeating the question?
What?
So he's trying not to laugh.
What do you want people to learn?
I want people to learn that Tourette's is a neurological involuntary motor and vocal disorder. I don't tick 24/7, and there's a lot of little baby being his fuck Chris. There's a lot.
He's trying not to laugh. Look at him.
Of things that people don't understand, like
You can see it in his eyes. He's laughing in his eyes.
people think that cussing is with everyone who has Tourette syndrome, but it's only in 10% of people with Tourette's.
And how has it been as you've gotten more famous? Do you believe that people are understanding better, or are they dopes like me who think you're acting?
Dopes like me, I didn't understand what he was saying because I didn't see this is the video I saw, and I didn't see the introduction where he said that he believes she was a comic actor, which he still believes to some extent, right? And the issue here is you could totally fake this if you wanted. I mean, for brief periods of time. And there are people who are faking it on the internet or in life, right? And, that means that they can get away with saying things. I mean, that's what, and again, I'm not minimizing how bad this must suck for someone with Tourette's. But the thing about Tourette's is you can say things, it's like having no filter. It's whatever you're thinking, the worst possible thoughts you're thinking, you can verbalize them, and you get a free pass. And I'm not trying to tell you it's a good thing or any of these things, but I'm saying that's what makes it humorous because, everybody has a filter. Everybody has thoughts that they don't share with other people and things that you hold back. And people with Tourette's seem to not be able to do that. And they will say, whatever it is, racial slurs or swears. In this case, she tells Chris Cuomos to F off multiple times, which is funny in itself because, he's Chris Cuomos. And I'm not trying to, minimize the suffering, like I said, but there's something there that's, kind of unique as a condition. And it's something that somebody could learn how to mimic. And, if they wanted to, and people are doing that on the internet. And so this is what he thought that was.
I say it's the same. I think there's a lot more people that don't understand what Tourette's is, and they like to educate themselves more. So I get thousands of DMs from parents, from teachers, from girls that have been diagnosed with Tourette's, and they've had to be kicked out of school for attention seeking because they rip up their homework or do things like that. I've had parents reach out to me asking me, oh, my son's coming home with a girlfriend and his girlfriend has Tourette syndrome. So, and then I also get
He's trying to see his smile. He's trying not to laugh.
very evil people that would comment and say like, "Go f yourself, Chris. Lick your baby weenie, blam up your ass, butter your own biscuit, fat ass." That have
He's laughing. The biscuit fat ass got him, and so he thinks it's funny, which you said at the beginning. Like, so why have her on? Because he watched her thinking she was a comedic actress, so he thought it was funny. He used to watch this and laugh, maybe with his kids or whatever. I don't know who he's with, but he found this entertaining. He didn't know that she actually had Tourette's. So his introduction to her, her appeal to him was that he thought, let's watch that part again. He thought that she was funny. He thought she was a comedic actress.
so. And then I also get very evil people that would comment and say like, "Go f yourself, Chris. Lick your baby weenie, blam up your ass, butter your own biscuit, fat ass." That have told me that my parents deserved to die.
He tried to cover it up. And it's right here.
That have told me that my parents deserve.
I mean, he's laughing. Like, why have her on when you can't control yourself? Because at the heart of it, Chris Cuomo is a real a-hole. You know, we saw this. He was at some sort of LBGTQ thing, and you know, he mocked the question of what his gender was. He said something like, "That's what." Someone said their pronouns, and Chris Cuomo said, "Those are mine too." An a-hole cisgender thing, you know, that typical cisgender thing that like my generation would say, like our generation would say, right? And he said it, you know, he said the joke, and it completely flopped, obviously, because he's not that guy, right? He wasn't this liberal CNN. He's an a-hole, and he thinks this girl's funny. That's why he was watching in the first place, and knowing that, it's a bonehead decision to bring her on, because you know you're going to laugh, right? Because you think it's funny, right? And I understand why he thinks it's funny. You know, I think it's funny too. But I certainly wouldn't bring, you know, I mean, this is a bad decision because this woman has a condition and you're making fun of it. You're laughing at it, right?
To die in a car accident because I'm faking my condition, or people have told me that, like, I've had to have the police at my house because people gave out my location and said they were going to come torch my house. Like, it's crazy.
Here's the thing. Clinically, people suck. And they're...
Thanks, Dr. Cuomos. Beijing Dr. Cuomos. Here's the thing. Thanks for giving your diagnosis.
Here's the thing. Clinically, people suck. And they're mean, and they're stupid, and they try to make themselves feel better by going after others. And you are the antidote.
You're the antidote, exactly. You're not going to laugh at her again, are you, Chris?
My young friend. Because you have my kids.
She gave him the finger. He just started cracking up.
Antidote. My young friend. Because you have my kids. You have my kids repeating your lines so that it's almost become cool. And not because...
Wait a minute. They're repeating her lines? They're not her lines. You think these are jokes? You think they're jokes? Like you mean they're doing an impression of her, and so you and your family are laughing at, you know, I'm sure when your kids do this impression, you're laughing, and you thought this was a comedic actor, and you're making it sound like this guy, right?
You have my kids. You have my kids repeating your lines so that it's almost become cool, and not because, you know, it's raunchy. It's because you're being real.
It's 100% because it's raunchy.
And you're living your truth. And they love it. They love the bravery of it. And so do I. And I love how you've changed your mission. You were at university. COVID was tough for you, tougher than for most, right? Really blew up your symptoms. And now you want to be a physical therapist because exercise helps you, and you believe it's a way that you can help others. A personal trainer, right?
Yes. So I go to the gym 5 days a week, and I go to a workout class, splitting it throughout the week. I love exercise. My boyfriend got me into it. I've been doing it for about a year now. I love it. It's my release. I obviously go to the gym and I wear headphones, and that's also a very big factor in how Colin, that bitch. That's
I think her boyfriend must be named Colin. That's how she. Yeah, that's look at him.
also a really
He listen. He's laughed. He just flat out laughed here.
that's also a very big factor in how that's also a really big like part in my journey was starting out with him.
Well, I love seeing him in the videos. You guys have a great bond. I love everything about your family, and I love the story you're telling to people and living your truth.
You're
And
done.
my kids,
You're done.
You're done. You're done, Chris.
you know what? I am done. I got to go to phone calls because they're blowing up with support for you.
Blow
So I
up
hope
that
you can
wiener.
watch it at
Blow up the. She just said blow up that wiener, which is, that's the best part. She just said blow up that wiener.
support for you.
Blow
So I
up
hope
that
you can
wiener.
watch it at
Yes,
home
you can.
and listen to everybody who wants to say great things to you. Balin Dupree, thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for coming.
Blowing up that wiener is, that's a funny line, regardless of anything. I mean, when someone just yells out blow up that wiener. And so Chris Cuomos, he got Cuomo'd. He just Cuomo'd himself. I've talked about this in my Journey series, way back when. Maybe I've mentioned it in one of my other videos or some of them, but it's been a long time since I've talked about this. If I have talked about this in detail, right? I have this issue that when I am not supposed to laugh at something in a socially charged situation, I find that hilarious. And I can't help myself, and I crack up. Like I just, like even now thinking about, laughter like bubbles up inside of you. Like it's a condition. It's a, there's a, biochemical release, and you get into a state and, it affects you. Tears come to your eyes. I mean, there's a reaction. Laughter is a, there's a thing. It's a, in some ways, it's an involuntary response that's created by, maybe a mental thinking something's funny, but also it reacts inside of you. And when I'm in a situation where I definitely am not supposed to laugh, like a situation where laughter is considered like, almost like a crime. I mean, the more stressful, the more tense it is, the funnier I find it, right? And so I have a couple stories to tell. There's a picture, I think I have a picture of my dad, my mom. This is when I was like 30, and we're at the ashram. I think I have a picture of us together at the Grand Canyon, one at the ashram. I'll put those pictures up. And then I'll show you a picture of my grandfather because I have a story about my grandfather, right? But I have that, like whatever's inside of me that laughs at the apocalypse, laughs at, things collapsing, laughs at things breaking down. That's part of that, right? That's why I call it the apocalypse, because I think the apocalypse is funny. I think the collapse of our country is funny. Like it's just something that's inside me. It's a part of who I am. And, you could call it a condition, right? When I first recognized it, I was, I think, between the ages of 3 and 5 years old. I was a little kid. And it's one of my earliest memories. I think it's my second earliest memory. The first one was my dad and I were walking around a pond, and I thought a unopened lily pad leaf was a frog. And maybe I'd seen a frog on the lily pad at first. I don't know. Like I was a little kid. And my dad was arguing, and I knew I was wearing this little red shorts and a little red shirt. I was like 4 years old, I think. And my dad and I argued, so he said finally he said, grab it. And he took my hand, and I leaned over to grab it, and he dropped me in the pond, like Elizabeth Pond Park, a place that I went to a lot when I was a kid. It's a big park with a rose garden and a pond, and it had an island in the middle, and when it would froze solid, we'd go skate out to the middle of it. But I'll show a picture when I was a kid first. There's a picture I have with me and like a puppy or something. And Fluffy was the dog's name. We had to give it away because my parents lied to me and said it was deaf. Right? I'll start with that, then I'll get into these other pictures, some of my down memory lane stuff. But anyways, so he dropped me in, and I had this moment where I realized my dad was an a-hole. Like I had adult level concepts. It was like I was like an adult realizing my situation. My dad was laughing too. He thought it was funny that he dropped me in the thing, because he's an a-hole. But like I wasn't traumatized as much as I had awareness. Like I had consciousness that I was like, oh, you can't trust this guy, he's a fool, right? And whatever. And so that was my first memory. But my next vivid memory was my mom and I are in Saturday Mass. Like the Catholics have Mass that you can go to on Saturday night. If something's going on Sunday, you can't go to Mass. And my mom, went to church religiously. And we're in church, and there's about 10 people in church. And behind us is two elderly women who have like, hardened faces, right? And I'm giggling and squirming. You're sitting in these uncomfortable pews, and I'm laying down and turning around, and this woman's giving me the stink eye. And I'm getting into a laughy mood. And then when I see her stink eye, I start laughing. I'm just making me laugh. And, I kept on doing things, and then I turned around to see if she was looking at me, and she was looking at me with stink eye, but then she would look away, right? She wouldn't hold my gaze. So I whipped my head around really quickly to catch her looking at me, and her eyes like got as big as silver dollars. Like I can still see the expression on her face. And I burst out laughing. Like the whole church was filled with the sound of my laughter. And my mom grabbed me and dragged me out. I was laying on the ground laughing hysterically, and she dragged me out of church, right? And so since that time, I've had a problem with this kind of thing. I don't know if it's a problem, but it's socially awkward. And I know that if I'm in a situation where I'm not supposed to laugh, there's a good chance I will. And once I start going, I can't stop. I can't stop. Like I can feel it even now a little bit, right? The inner condition. So, a picture of my grandfather here. It's me going fishing with him. And I think I'm 4 years old in this picture. And my grandfather, Herbert Selig, was like an action hero kind of person. Like he was he fought. He was 15 years old. He volunteered to go into World War I. He came back and played professional football when he was back when he got paid like $10 a game. He had one of those leather helmets without the face mask. So he was living in Chicago. He played for whatever, the Chicago Bears or whatever team that was around, when football was just becoming a thing. Like he was a good athlete. He fought in World War I. Then he went and fought in World War II. He took off, and he was German. Like he fought against the Germans twice. But he was American. Like he just believed in America. He was a, real patriotic type of person. And he had skills. Then he became a fireman back in the days when they didn't have oxygen masks and they had to go in. And like it was in one of those fire trucks that, that they'd have to have somebody in the back steering. They go around these corners, and at some point he fell off the fire truck, like it was a thing. And like he broke his back, but he still did the job, right? And he built stuff. He built boats for people. Like he built like wooden boats for people. Rich people, he lived in Boca Raton. He retired to Boca Raton, Florida, which was like a paradise, still kind of nice there. There's this famous country club called Boca West, and he worked at as a retired person. He had carpentry skills, and he made his own fishing poles. Like they were incredible fishing poles. Like I wanted all this stuff, and my parents got rid of it. Like they got rid of the stuff. I had a knife that he gave me that floated. But when we went to India, I left it in our car, and we never got our car back. It was a whole thing. The first trip, it was a whole thing. But I have a few of his things around somewhere. But he was like my favorite relative. He was, interesting. He took me deep sea fishing. I used to catch all these fish. I was a good, like natural, lucky fisherman or whatever. And, played pool. And, I also I had a switchblade that he took off a German soldier, like we all had these artifacts and things, right, from this guy's life. But he was like an actual action hero. He'd fought in 2 wars, and he had played professional sports and done all these things, right. A lot of the things that I get from him, in terms of my farming skills or any kind of skills I have, as a mechanical skills and things, come from him. My dad was like clueless, and so was this guy. So a lot of the things that I have that have benefited me as a homesteader come from this guy. And he was my favorite relative, and I look forward to seeing him. You know, I used to get in trouble, and he'd go, Buster's in the doghouse, call me Buster, right? Which back then was a much less derogatory term. And, you know, he was, I look forward to going to Florida. In Florida, you know, we went on vacation a year, every year we drove down there and things. It was a whole thing. You know, I love driving through the South, and, you know, I never liked Connecticut. And so, you know, I've always liked Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, these southern states. And, you know, the whole thing. I like the whole experience was something I look forward to. But he died. I think he was 10 years old when he died. I just looked it up. I was 11 years old, if that's the right Herbert Selig that died in Boca Raton, Florida. But anyways, but I was, you know, a little kid. Like, I remember being a little kid. I thought I was younger, but whatever. My grandfather died of lung cancer, and we went to see him at the wake. And I looked at him, and I'm like, that's not him. He's gone. And it's the first memory I have of being aware of a soul. And, you know, when I saw my grandfather's body, because they had lipstick on, like he was this big, tough guy, you know, he was kind of gnarly, and he was not the kind of guy that would put lipstick on. I saw lipstick on him, because you could see his lips were kind of blue. And I'm looking at him, I'm like, that's not him. Like, I'm like, why am I, you know, looking? It's just, it's kind of, you know, why are we parading this corpse around? Because he's gone, like he's not here. And, you know, the awareness of life being, you know, a soul. Of course, you know, we were talking about abortion earlier, and this idea of that, right? That without a soul, there's no life. And his soul was gone. The essence that I knew as my grandfather was gone. There was just his body. And so we sat down, and he belonged to the American Legion Club, which is for veterans. And we were sitting in the front row of the wake, and these guys from the American Legion, you know, other soldiers, and again, this was from World War II, and it's, you know, 1970, whatever it was, 77 or whatever it was. And I'm sitting there with my dad, and these guys come in. And they are drunk, and they're wearing mismatching uniforms, because it's for different, you know, they're different platoons or, you know, different branches of the armed forces. And they're obese. And this one guy looks like the Sergeant Schultz from the Hogan's Hero Show that was popular when I was a kid. The guy comes in, he's wearing a helmet, and it's got a strap, and the strap is around his lips and not his chin, because it doesn't fit him anymore. And he weighs probably like 300 pounds, and he's probably, you know, under 200 when he was a soldier, and his belly is sticking out of his uniform. You can see like inches of his belly. And they walk in, and like, I immediately want to laugh. And my dad and I look at each other like, oh my God, we're going to start laughing, right? It's a funeral. And I knew, you know, I had this issue because it was already prevalent in my life. And I knew I could feel the laughter bubbling up. And at one point, the fat guy farts, which, you know, farts don't usually make me laugh. You know, I always thought that they were overrated as a comedy when I was a little kid. But this one did, because the absurdity of the thing. These overweight, you know, guys, and one guy had a bottle, a flask of liquor in his back pocket. Like, they were obviously drunk and had been drinking, and it was, you know, like noon. And they came in, and, you know, I don't know how much my grandfather used to go down there. Later on, I just looked it up again. And later on, I would go to the place when I was, you know, I had dropped out of college. I went to school in Florida for a year. And I dropped out of college, and my dad retired, and they moved down there when I was already down there. And so I was back at living at home, and I was kind of miserable because I had spent a year in college away from my parents, and that was great. And then, you know, and I ended up being in a cast. I messed up my ligament in my ankle when I was playing basketball. You know, I had like an injury where I needed a cast. It was a whole thing. But I worked at Kmart for a while. You know, Kmart, used to be the old Walmart. And, you know, back then I was using drugs a lot, smoking pot, and, you know, doing coke some of the time, and drinking. And one of my coworkers was a real druggie. And we were hanging out, and he's like, let's go to the American Legion. And I really kind of didn't totally remember what it was till we went in there. I'm like, oh my God, this is where my grandfather went. And it was basically a bar that you could get cheap alcohol. We paid like $5 for a membership, and neither one of us were veterans. And, it was all these old soldiers sitting around. They had a pool table. And you got beers for like 50 cents, right? And I had this like surreal moment because I went back to my grandfather's funeral. So this guy, farts and, there's the flask, and me and my dad just lose it. We're laughing. My dad pulls out his handkerchief, which he had because, people that time, Joe Biden, no malarkey time, men used to carry around handkerchiefs, which were kind of gross, whatever. But, of course, we substitute that with disposable Kleenex now, right? My dad puts the handkerchief over his face and pretends he's crying, but I'm just losing and laughing. My grandmother's, appalled. She's like, can't believe I'm laughing. And my mom's really mad. And, I knew my mom's going to be pissed at me, but I just couldn't help it. Like, now I'm gone. And I couldn't get back. Like, I couldn't stop. And I love my grandfather. It wasn't disrespect to him or, military anything. It was just, the thing was funny. Like, it was what I was seeing funny, a bunch of, washed up soldiers who were drunk and, probably all suffering from, PTSD or whatever they went through in these various wars. I mean, some of them had fought probably in World War I, they were old guys. And, so that happened. And then we go from there to the funeral. And I stopped laughing. I'm over it. And we go there, and they give him a, 21-gun salute. And they pull out their guns, and they're firing into the air. And I had the image of all these birds flopping down and falling on all of us, right? And then I still had that laughter, like it was still in me. So now I start laughing at the funeral. And so, I realized it was something that was socially unacceptable and was something I couldn't control. And as I grew older, there would be times people would be like girlfriends or, somebody would be like in tears and telling me a heart-wrenching story. And again, I would later become a counselor, a clinician, and people would be emoting to me and telling me some heart-wrenching story, opening up. And my inclination was to feel the laughter come on, right? Like I would feel like, oh my God, I'm going to laugh, and this is the worst possible time. When somebody's telling you, like, they're opening up to you and telling you some tragedy or trauma or something that, and they feel safe with you and you crack up, like it's the worst. Like, and they would inevitably say something funny. They'd be crying or they'd make a face or do something that I would find funny. This is one of the reasons I knew I couldn't be a clinician, because imagine, as a professional and somebody comes in and they have something they've been holding back and they're not telling anybody, and you're creating this so-called safe space for them. And they tell you something and you start cracking up and you can't help yourself. Like they could be like emotionally damaged for life. So I knew that this wasn't a good fit for me because it was something I really couldn't control. And years later, my brother, I started doing the Sagemark system. I told my brother about it. And we would go to weekly meditations, Wednesday meditations. Sometimes he'd come to the Sunday one. But the Wednesday night one was at my preceptor, the original preceptor, Fred's house. He would give these sittings. And, there were things that would happen. And my brother didn't feel the transmission. Transmission is given and cleaning is given. And I could feel it, my brother couldn't. So, it was really important to me, but my brother was skeptical. He later became the caretaker at the ashram. It was a whole thing. I've talked about this in the Journey series. It's a part of this whole, thing that I do. But we, we're both a-holes. And we would try to make each other laugh. We went to a gathering there was an ashram in New York State, in the Catskill Mountains. And, I went to the Catskill Game Farm when I was a kid, and I always, wanted to go back. And it's an area I really like. And the first gathering I ever went to, Chargy, there was no master there, but there was, people there having a gathering. One of the guys I would later know, someone who does the practice now, went to this guy as a preceptor. He's kind of a chucklehead, but he built a kind of a cool underground house, and he donated, or at least he sold the place to the mission, and it had like 20 acres, nice piece of land. And we went to our first gathering there. And while we were meditating, a woman started to make moaning-like sounds like she was, having some sort of orgasm or something. And I bite my lip. And I know my brother's there, and I could hear him, like, trying not to laugh. And we were talking afterwards, and he says to me, I haven't felt nothing, right? Because we'd both been practicing, I would say, for a month or so. So we were pretty new to the thing. And he goes, I can't feel anything, because he didn't feel the transmission. It was a whole thing we talked about. And this woman's having a nut. And he goes, if I started laughing, I would have to leave and never come back, right? And so he obviously shared, this same kind of issue. And because of that, we started, at weekly meditations, we'd look at each other trying to make each other crack up. And there was funny things that happened at Fred's house. Fred in himself was funny. Fred was a small Jewish hippie. And, he's very kind of etheric and like he wasn't of this world kind of, person. He had odd kind of, whatever he was. And his mom was kind of a biatch, but his dad was kind of hilarious. His dad would just go and sing vaudevillian songs, and his dad was named Al. But Al would fall asleep during every meditation and snore incredibly loud. And there was one of those director's chair, was one of those canvas chairs, and I made the mistake of sitting in it. And Al was sitting behind me, and Al fell asleep, and his head was, resting on my back the whole time. And I'm trying not to laugh because, this is funny. And, I've always had that problem since then at gatherings and times because my brother would we'd look at each other, something would happen. One time a woman got up and she had just come in on a flight from California and she was visiting, I don't know what, she was a member of the system. And she goes in the bathroom, which was right next to where we were, where we were meditating, and she just starts throwing up. It's like we're in the room with her because it's silent because we're meditating. And so, and I mean, like I said, once I go, I can't stop. And I always laughed more at gatherings. I always am a happier person because of the condition there, spiritual condition. I'm lighter, and so it's been a problem over the years that I don't know if I should call it a problem because I'm not trying to get rid of it. I'm not trying to fix it because, I like to laugh. So, but it's where my whole thing about the apocalypse, right? And there's another guy who, he was an engineer, and we used to sit next to each other during talks at the ashram, and these women would start crying and, emoting like Oprah Winfrey stuff, We had this joke that, like they would talk about the master of the system and go, that's when I knew he loved me, this. And, we would look at each other and, start cracking up. So I had to stop going to the talks because I'd laugh and people were looking at me, right? Because someone would be giving a heartfelt talk crying and I'd be in the audience laughing, right? And so what I'm saying here is I know I have that issue, like whatever it is, and I'm not doing anything to fix it. So I don't work as a counselor, and I don't put myself in situations where people are talking to me about something where I know they're going to say something funny, and I know that as soon as I realize I can't laugh, it's going to make it even funnier. And so, I wouldn't do that, right? And when you have someone with Tourette's on your show, and you already were laughing at this person, you and your kids are repeating the lines and the things he says, and you're making fun of it in a way, and you're laughing at it, and you think it's funny, then this was the inevitable outcome for Chris Cuomos, right? Okay, so there's just one more thing to get to here. I showed you this before, but somebody put the dates here. They're almost over 8,000 miles apart between these two places, right? Mesopotamia and Ecuador. Different regions, different continents, different cultures, right? And then there was this. Before they died, Muhammad said, I don't know the purpose of life. Buddha said, seek the truth. Confucius said, I am not the way. But Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me. Jesus is the only one who rose from the dead. The other three are still in their grave. One of the problems with Christianity is they scare the crap out of Christians, whatever it is. They scare the crap out of the flock, the parishioners, to not look into other religions. And so Christians are woefully ignorant of other religions. And so they don't know, like they're making it sound like these things that are being said. And again, Confucius was not a spiritual person, he was a philosopher. And so he has nothing to do with some sort of Chinese religion or something like this, right? So they're quoting these guys, and Confucius has quite a number of sayings because we've read them on fortune cookies. But they're comparing these quotes that they don't even know these people and anything they're about with Jesus's quote. But the problem is, with Jesus's quote, which I said before, it has too much I in it, right? It has too much egoism. You can't say stuff like that. You can't say that the only way to get to heaven is through me. You guess, it's not something you could say even if it was true, and it's not, right? And that's the problem because, the issue with Jesus, well, let's get to the comment here first. Let me find the comment. I think it's right here. And that's not it. Here it is. Chuck Mizier is awesome. Chuck Miser? I'm not sure. Comment video about religion and Jesus. Paul hates Jesus because it goes against his no mind ascension crap. It doesn't. Catholics hate Jesus too. They worship Mary. Paul knows boop about Jesus, but he sure hates him. Now, there's no hatred towards him. In fact, I would say that I have more positive feelings about the real Jesus, and you guys are all haters because you've created an imaginary Jesus. You've been sold an imaginary Jesus, and that is disrespectful to the real one and the real struggle that he had and the humanness that all these people have. All these people who are evolved souls still have human feelings, human egos, and are actually more sensitive and have, they experience more pain at the mistreatment of the people that mistreat them. In this case, it was Jesus' own disciples and his followers, and then the Romans and the Jewish Pharisees and all the people that mistreated him for bringing down a divine message, right? Jesus was an evolved soul, and if I hated him, I wouldn't say that. I mean, people know, this person's just stupid, but, most people can understand this. But he was an evolved soul that came down to teach a certain group of people about God. I believe he went to India and he did these other things, and he learned other stuff himself, but he wanted to present this information to other people, like lots of other people did. And like lots of other white people, European people, people in America, and other places, pretty much every place outside of India, he was tortured and killed for it, right? That when someone presents spiritual information in the West, they're killed. And, it doesn't have to be physical death, but it could be, them making you sound crazy or dismissing you or ostracizing you from the community, whatever it is. Spiritual people are mistreated. Saints are mistreated. They're killed. In America and Europe, they kill their saints. And it's that kind of attitude that has been still prevalent ever since, since Jesus has died as well in the Christian tradition. Think about all the Christian saints who were tortured and killed, and later on they're like, oh, this guy was a saint. And so these people who, did a good job and they were doing what they were supposed to do were mistreated by the people. And so that's where the real hatred comes from. If Jesus was around today, I would recognize him as being a spiritual person, like if I had contact with him in his teachings, where you guys would all condemn him. Like, let's say Jesus is alive right now, but he's not a Christian, and he's doing some teaching, and you guys are, condemning that because it's not what you've learned and what you've been programmed as and indoctrinated as. So you're the real haters. You're the real, because you believe something false that doesn't exist. Of course, they're going to make him sound better than he is. And they're going to sell you a bunch of things he can't. They're going to make promises they're make promises in his name that he can't fulfill, and all of the rest of it. And so, you're the true haters because you're not willing to look at, what he is and recognize his humanity and see how much he must have suffered by the disappointment in people, right? I do a little bit of that here. I present spiritual information. And, it's rejected by most people, and, I'm criticized, and, I don't look at what I get back as being, hurtful towards me. It certainly isn't being treated the way Jesus was treated. But just the little bit that I teach here, the little bit I do, it's a disappointment in humanity's reaction. If I thought about it and I cared about it, I would be depressed and sad by how bad humanity sucks and can't respond to just even the bare minimum spiritual teachings, because humanity is floundering right now. And so everybody who can't do that is a hater and somebody resisting what needs to happen. And they hate their own souls. They hate the divinity within them. They hate anybody that represents divinity. And, they are using some BS religious dogma to cover up the fact that they suck, right? And that they're stupid and remedial people. And I'm not saying that to come down on people. I mean, that's the reality. It's sad reality, and I can appreciate anybody who's gone out in the past and laid it all on the line to teach the masses about God and are punished for it, and then their words and their image. I mean, Jesus didn't look like he looks like in the Christian tradition. They made him look like a European. They made him look like he's, I don't know, German or Scandinavian or Swedish or something. He's got blonde to light brown hair and blue eyes, and he's got Western white people features, and that's not what he looked like. He was born in Israel. He looked like the people that live there now in that region, right? He looked like one of them. Whatever he looked like that. If you guys saw him, you would denounce him as being Jesus. If you went back in time and you saw the real Jesus, and he doesn't look like the way he looked, like you think he looks, now the way that you've been told he looks, and if he didn't act the way you think he should act, you would reject him. I bet you guys couldn't recognize Jesus. I bet if we took Jesus out of the past and we marched him into your church, none of you guys would recognize him. And when he said it was Jesus, you'd reject him and maybe throw him stones at him. So who's the hater, right? Me or is it you? Because it's obviously you. Anyways, I got to wrap this one up. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely reporting from the Apocalypse and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.